welcome everybody to the third episode of the Farm Consciousness podcast. And again, this is going to be a really exciting one. Um, we've got Devon here. I've followed Devon Graham, for many years on social media, and I got introduced to his stuff because of his breath work. And that was really eye-opening, him tying the breath to a lot of spiritual principles. And that was a really amazing sort of rabbit hole for me to go down. And his research has been eye-opening for me. And yeah, Devon has since grown and he does his breath work still, but he's also involved with a lot of scalar technology. And I know he owns and is part of developing scalar technology, involved in it. And I've even purchased one of his scalar projectors, which has been amazing to use and fun to use as well. And so this is what this episode is all about.
Thank you for having me. My name is Devon Graham, aka the Black Airbender. Some of you may know me as. And yeah, honored to share breath journey, breath insights, breath play, breath art, and the breath connection.
Amazing. I think the first place to start, I guess, is also just for myself is, what led you to where you are now about understanding the breath at such a level, and getting into the various kinds of frequency and technologies that you're into, and yeah, just give us a sort of story of how you've come here.
Yeah, so I was a very ignorant, up the ass entrepreneur back in the day, and yeah, I even used to race cars back then as well. So yeah, life was literally an interesting movie. My parents are Jamaican as well, so I grew up in an immigrant household, and that first generation. So living in America as well. That's where I'm from. For some of you who may not know, and uh, my journey, the the pivotal point was going to California with with a business partner at the time, to lose it all and to also win it all at the same time in terms of wisdom. Because when I lost it all, that's when I found the power of breath and also the power of cleansing and fasting in that regard as well. But more importantly, the breath pattern and how uh, different styles of breath patterns can influence one's life to then take you on a journey in the sense of more breath awareness to then create what I call breath art, breath play, um, and more in the parasympathetic sense, utilizing it for everyday life beyond the sit down session as well. And that started with a Sifu at the time that I got to witness his white hair turn black over the course of like 1 week. So it was very interesting just seeing it firsthand of what some may call the Bigu practice in ancient Chinese medicine as well, and just seeing it firsthand of a master in person for over the span of over 4 months. I got to uh, just be in a fun also environment as well in terms of learning, and uh, the way he taught was definitely not traditional whatsoever. So it was very like I would say a Mr. Miyagi type of vibe in a sense, because when I met him for the first time too, I told him I literally lost everything to the business partner, and he literally uh, adopted me. I would say for a little bit, and yeah, it was a fun experience bringing all of what I learned there back to Jersey, back from California all the way back to Jersey, and sharing it with family at the time, and then it grew from family then into all the way into corporate offices, to then getting to the point where corporate offices started to realize uh, the the increase of production when stress is being reduced on a daily basis, to the point where now I started signing NDAs even before hitting social media. So it was a huge ripple, if you will, bringing that into, I guess, more of the social media space. But in real world, outside of that, I was already on a trajectory, and an interesting one, because overall I got to witness all different walks of life, and give that part of myself into their world, and amplify what breath, no matter what lifestyle you live, you can integrate this into your everyday lifestyle as well.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and um, also the power of having what most people would call a mentor, or somebody that you can learn from, especially these things that are not well known. I have a mentor myself who teaches the art of body electronics, which is a modality that it's a healing modality that not many people know about, and just to have that guidance to understand and integrate these principles is amazing. So with the breath work, how did the breath work, and then understanding the frequencies and the scalar, how did you make that connection, and what is that connection, first of all?
The connection is frequency, I would say. How you breathe is how you live. How you live is your frequency in itself, of what you do frequently in your everyday life, that literally becomes layers of data. And now, as we get to the AI age, we're starting to see data start to pick up on metrics that we were not so, I would say, just more aware of, right? And meanwhile, we have computers or technology, in a sense, scanning everything, in a sense where we may have overlooked, or may, in a sense, at one point, just be guided in different ways, in a sense, right? So bringing it full circle, the the breath is a foundational essence that represents contrast. It not just represents the inhale and the exhale. And with contrast, you can also think friction, right? And with friction comes heat. And with heat, you can find one of the fourth states of matter, plasma, in itself. And if I were to go on the edge of the universe, you could literally see I would say, the matrix shield of bunches of dots all over. And those dots can also tell us the data that would show us what would happen uh, if we were to go backwards. But what we're seeing, if we were to go to the edge of the universe, we're seeing the aspect of the universe expanding. That's what we know for a fact, that the universe is still expanding. So, wait, if we were expanding, what were we doing back then? So, if we were to reverse to all the way to the beginning points, it was the air, the atmosphere itself was definitely more plasmic. You can look at petroglyphs from all over the world, in all the different spaces of the countries of the world, and you'd see very similar drawings of, people call them beings, aliens, but turns out they were just plasma discharge, and you can put them side by side, and they look like plasma discharge that they were probably seeing in everyday life and probably breathing in, hence probably bigger giants. Is that why we're finding skeletons all over the world with giants? It makes sense. If there's more plasmic energy in the air, bone density is going to be bigger, of course. Trees are going to be bigger, which they were back then. So many, a lot of things were just bigger, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic when it comes to the plasmic consciousness and how that connects with even the breath itself, in a sense. So everything is somewhat plasma connected one way or another. And it went from making things like tensor dilators, where we would have copper tensors, but small enough to go in your nose and increase. It's a lot better than those plastic dilators and would help people with deviated septums. On top of the fact that you're having those copper ions in the membrane of your nose that stays on there for over like 9 hours just off minimal touch. So that's a huge plus of when you're inhaling and also being in certain environments as well. And just being on that path led me to things like the scalar plasma projector, where the original was actually Nikola Tesla's, but we made it more safe for people when they're holding it and they won't get shocked on the bottom. So we, we look at tools like that, and we just focus on making them better or more useful in a sense and just modernize it. We want to get to the point where I don't care if anyone takes this idea, but you can literally make cold plasma like a ore by itself, and actually program it with frequencies where you can hold the actual plasma ball energy itself in real form, and do different qigong poses with it if you want, and get a charge without it being harmful to the environment. So that's how far we want to take scalar tech, if you will, to that point. And who's not to say some of the UFOs out there, or UAPs, or whatever you want to call them, who's not to say they're man-made technology that maybe a billionaire with crypto down there had know about scalar tech as well and hired a bunch of engineers to create their own UFOs. I will say we are now at the point, God willing, that we have peer-to-peer resources that will mirror government resources at this point. That we're at that point. I just want to be the first to just put it really out there. Like, we're at that point.
Wow. Yeah, that's exciting. Really exciting stuff. I want to tap into the breathwork stuff, but I also really want to sort of hone into the scalar stuff because that really intrigues me. It fascinates me to the core because we're talking about plasma, we're talking about kind of energy and how we're relating to that. And I mean, it's clear when you look into lost history and the way the world was pre-cataclysms or just ancient history, the atmospheres were different and our relationship with the atmosphere was different. And you're talking about giants being bigger, trees being bigger, nature being bigger, animals being bigger. And
It made sense why we made the architecture the way we did back then, mimicking certain engineering and certain sacred geometry. If the atmosphere was already like that, you don't need to plug in as much. You can manipulate what's already there in the mana in the air, and shift it as you build it. So yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just plasma. We're talking about plasma. Is that the same as scalar? Like, what is scalar energy? And yeah, and is that plasma?
Yes, I would say so, in a density form, in a density sense. So if we were going back to what I was saying earlier about going to the edge of the universe, if we were to reverse, quote unquote, back in time, in terms of what quantum physicists can even say, what was happening as things were being created or quote unquote scripted from the matrix reality, if you will, there's free electrons and free protons just roaming. They're not really heating up or rubbing on to each other in a sense at a particular point. And it's until the when they do, that's when the quote unquote plasmic atmosphere starts to really amplify, and then you start to get even different bacteria or different source material, etc., starts to come into the plane of reality that we can now perceive as physical to a certain degree, all the way down to that tiny atom. So what scalar is also is a source prime energy in itself that is also a vacuum. So it's a 0 point in a particular to a particular degree, 0 point, where it's it's more linear to a square wave in a sense, where amplified electrons are in particular points of reference.
Okay, that's a little difficult to follow, but in a
In a yeah, in a bottled down form, scalar energy at one point is the primary source of energy. You can even say the sun itself is scalar as well. I would say it's a it's the source code of our matrix reality. Everything comes from a scalar point.
and what I read what read about scalar is that it's a wave, but it's not. It's a frequency or a wave. I might be, messing with the linguistics here, but I hope you can get me. But it doesn't. There is no direction. There is no movement to it,
Right. It's non-directional.
right? And so it's just sort of permeating our reality, and where are we swimming within this frequency? It's within us and in our environment.
Exactly. So for it to be non-directional, that means it's in every direction. That's the point. That's why it's non-directional in the first place. That's why one person can take a picture of somebody and place frequencies on that picture and run frequencies no matter where that person is, via either a scalar device in that sense too. So that picture, even with us right now, one day, I feel like one day, mark my words, there's going to be a visual representation where we can wear lenses maybe, and we will see more of the plasmic dimension, where we can see more of the plasmic dimension. You're going to see like it'll just be all electrons moving, but you can still see atoms. There'll be a mouth moving as I'm talking, stuff of that nature. And think of a picture of that. You're not just taking the picture of somebody, you're taking a picture of their plasmic imprint that is unique to them. So that's what photos represent in itself as well. They're they're bio fingerprints or biosignature, if you, and that's how you can run remote frequencies of healing and stuff of nature, and even do crazy other things in the realm of quantum and even holographic technology at that point too.
Mhm. So we are interacting with scalar waves or plasma in all kinds of ways through our intentions, through our will, our desire, our energy that we're putting forth and out. It's all traveling and being manifested through the essence of the scalar.
Yes, and the brain is the antenna that sucks it all in. That way, that's why we can back then use certain temples in my opinion, I feel like they were communicating using certain temples because the plasmic energy was so high. If one place in China has uh, a similar top piece, a similar antenna, the jet pillar, if you will. If one place in China has a jet pillar, Egypt has a jet pillar, all the way in Africa, down south has a jet pillar, Australia has a jet pillar. What do you think they were probably running etherically? A network, their own network, in a sense, communicating using chanting or whatsoever, sending signals to different tribes, etc. It was a whole different realm back then, which makes sense if the atmosphere was that plasmic. It just makes sense. It just makes sense that everything is more turned on, if you will.
But that would also sort of help us explain the similarities of architecture and the similarities of certain cultures and from all around the world, right? If they're sending and receiving information through this plasma, is that then ether as well? Would scalar, plasma, ether, are they all the words for the same thing?
They're all the same. All the same.
Okay, and so how are you utilizing, how are you working with scalar at this moment, or I have done as well?
Yeah, so we like to also host events where people will have the scalar devices in their hands as well and do the breath therapy or breath journey. Another way, uh, take things like hurricanes and take a picture of the hurricane and place them on the scalar plate as well and run harmonic frequencies through that. Places that have fire right now. Type in hydrogen on our laptop frequencies and pump it in there as well. So there's so many different things and avenues as well you can take it to. You can even type in peptides as well. I'm playing around with that. You can even type in certain nucleus if you want to even go that deep. So there's frequencies to everything, and that is the scalar connection in itself because it comes from one point. And it's very interesting where you can take scalar infused YouTube frequency music and compare them to something that is not scalar infused. Let's say one is scalar infused with 528 hertz. I tell people to do this all the time. Go try it out on my YouTube, it's on there. Scalar infused 528, and then place it with some random 528 song you find on YouTube. The main difference of why it's like that, no matter what you upload to YouTube, it's going to change the bit rate. I learned that from DJing, and Scalar helps keep it intact. So no matter where it's being uploaded to, it's the essence that is so indescribable, so unmeasurable for some reason. It's still imprinted and it keeps the integrity of the 528 in there. So that's also another way of how uh, you can use scalar in the music industry in itself. Like, so no matter where my sub personally are being uploaded, they're always scalar infused, and they definitely hold a resonance for sure.
As you're speaking about scalar and some of the stuff it can do, I don't know why, but water comes to my mind, and how water is a carrier of information, almost in the same way, in an etheric sense. It's almost similar.
Easily. That's how I explain how our home version scalar plate interacts with your environment easily through the atmosphere of water. Think of the water in your atmosphere as a web. So as the frequencies are playing off the home scalar, it's interconnecting, communicating, and pulsating, if you will, into the resonance of the space. And when it pulsates, even though you can't see the wave, it's there. And the beautiful thing about scalar waves, it cannot be uh, distorted unless it's undone by another scalar impulse, if you will. So that's a point of keeping it intact.
Right. And is there a way in which scalar can be used in with bad intentions, with evil intentions?
Oh yeah, we've seen it actually in the newspaper where they said I think it was a group of officials were attacked by a frequency weapon. That's out there, so it's out there. And there was one where Australian protesters, yeah, they were used by this truck that came in with their satellite, and all the truck had to do was park, turn that thing on, and then microwave everyone there. The girls were bleeding out their ears. It was very horrific, if you will.
That kind of makes me think about the CIA heart attack gun. You heard about that?
You can thank Tesla for that. They re-engineered it. Like it all points back to that man's house. You can only imagine the things that you probably never even heard about, copyrighted stuff. And I had to go to uh, there's a there's a private museum up north. This guy went all over the world. He'll spend thousands of dollars. He doesn't care, just to protect uh, whoever is out there doing it, burning old Nikola Tesla stuff. Like he'll pay thousands of dollars to save it, stuff like that. He's even witnessed someone winning an auction, like this group of people winning an auction and ripping up some papers and stuff. And that's when he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make a mission of making my own museum." And I'll tell you guys a story. On the most saddest story that I've learned about Tesla, unfortunately. So you know J.P. Morgan, right? Who gave him the loan, right? At one point. So there's a twist to it. A lot of people don't know, but J.P. Morgan gave him another loan after he didn't finish the well, he technically did. He send that communication overseas, etc., right? And Tesla takes this loan and never says thank you. And this was when Tesla is like dirt in the dirt, so to speak. And this was at the point where he used some of that money to, move into New York and start his own little lab over there. And he even acts actually another time after this, and it's pretty sad. But unfortunately, every time that he got it, he never even said thank you. He never even, this was like the saddest part. He never said thank you. He never gave back. But the crazier part was most of the money that he used was for feeding birds. It was for feeding the bird. I'm like, and he didn't even say thank you. Like, yo, it's like, and he told him like, I'm using this money to also feed the birds. Blah blah blah. It's in there. I'm like, wow, wow. But the irony of that is like, yeah, I'm gonna take J.P. Morgan's money and feed the birds.
So all of this, you could say, or a lot of this is stemming from Nikola.
Oh, but I do wanna add on real quick because it does connect to scalar and birds. Even Tesla probably knew this. If you watch birds fly, they fly in a particular pattern, especially when they're all together. I think it's called a murmur effect, and they move in a particular pattern. They are literally moving with the scalar pattern. That is literally what they're moving with in real time. So it's also beneficial to get in also the habit of bird watching too. I know bees watching is really cool. They live long, etc. Birds too. The natives know also about bird watching and stuff of that nature. They talk about it, but bird watching is highly underrated. Bird watching is a beautiful, simple meditation in itself, and it's because of the way the patterns of how the bird fly through the scalar movement is what also is giving your resonance and brain a rewiring in itself.
So then are they're following the movement of the scalar energy, or
That's how they get stronger, like glides, and they just know intuitively. it's part of them. It's the crystal that's also in our nose. It's, they're using their own crystal to navigate and pinpoint to. So scalar in itself can also imprint information into crystals. Shout out Dr. Fred Bell. Dr. Fred Bell proved this using lasers pointing out of crystals and then fogging up the place, and then you can actually see spirits or even maps coming out of crystals. So that's another thing with scalar and crystals.
Well, we are essentially a crystal. You know, we have crystals in our mouth.
Mm-hmm.
We are crystals. We have
Exactly.
crystals all throughout our body. We are a crystalline matrix, and so it makes sense in how that the scalar interacts with us as well, because a crystal, it's a sender and a receiver. It can receive information, but it can also emit information. So depending
Right.
on so if we've got an intention of a scalar energy coming to us, right, or coming for ourselves, for our own crystal, for our own bodies, yeah, like I'm wondering how, the things like law of attraction, you reap what you sow, these kinds of mentalities, or whatever you resist persists. I'm wondering how scalar plays in with that in terms of attracting a certain kind of frequency and emitting the same one, essentially. What that is doing in a physical sense is bringing back whatever that's inside of you, whatever you're attracting.
So within scalar, right, there is no time, right? It's a vacuum, technically. So there's even an interesting experiment you can do if anyone has a home scaler and you're running it, if you can get like those TikTok those clocks, those old-fashioned clocks, you'll actually start to notice some of those clocks start to go slower in time because it's within the scalar field. So if the aspect of time, if scalar is within, the past, present, future, etc., in a sense connecting, what does that remind you of? The breath. When you're quote unquote resting in this body physically, you are somewhat breathing. Yeah, you are breathing, and at the same time, your mind or mental may be quote unquote elsewhere, sending a signal, and you're actually writing that signal technically into other dimensions or spaces within either your auric field, hopefully, or literally elsewhere. So, with that being said, I'm literally saying the breath in itself is scalar. So I like to say what you breathe life into is what you're living at that point. How you breathe is how you live. And that ties into the aspect of law of attraction and stuff of that nature. Any architect you see, it took a couple breaths to make that architect, or that stature or building. I think there's an old one. There's an old connection I love to do with the Eiffel Tower, where you can take the cost of what it costs to build the Eiffel Tower, and if you were to take the average breath per day for a construction worker, maybe a male, whatever, and then you multiply it by the years, no matter if it's a couple millions of breaths or whatever, millions of dollars, you'll still get some connecting numbers to that 1.4 million, 1.4 million. It's very interesting, but that is literally the matrix reality, or I like to call it the breath matrix in a sense, because everything is breathing or everything has contrast in itself, going back to what I mean, the breath being beyond just breathing, but representing contrast.
So we can use our breath to essentially that is the mechanism in which we ourselves, without the kind of scalar machine or without any technology, how we can relate to it and use it for our own benefit or for the healing of others and the planet and whatnot.
Yeah, man.
So how? What are some of the principles of your practices with the breath that you teach, um, that's vital for people to start connecting with their breath first and foremost? Because I guess that's the first thing to do is understand you're not breathing properly first, and then how you're going to correct that. And yeah, is there specific things you do in relation to just understanding the connection between the breath and the scalar? But yeah, just interested in sort of some of your principles that you have regarding the breath and helping people.
Yeah, so one of the things we pride ourselves in the certification program is anyone who even have a deviated septum, right? To aid someone who has a deviated septum or any nose issues of breathing. And beyond the physical, there's always a mental part where whoever has that issue, what are they always saying? I can't breathe most of the time, right? So it's also getting to the point of rewiring and also just building a connection with your breath mentally, physically, and spiritually where your breath is your friend. That's one of the principles that I tend to focus on and share with my clients and students is your breath is with you 24/7, 365. It knows what you're breathing life into mentally. It knows what you're thinking. It also has been around the world 3 times to come right back to you with that inhale if we're doing aerodynamics in itself. So, what does that teach you? The breath itself is a living entity, but it's also wise in itself. It has been here. We're literally breathing in Caesar's breath. That's also a great book. I highly recommend everyone go get Caesar's Breath. That is a really informative book, one of my favorites. So we're literally breathing in Caesar's breath. So we're literally breathing in information. So when you inhale, are you inhaling healing? When you're exhaling, are you exhaling healing? That type of dialogue is what everyone can start doing ASAP, even immediately, right now. And that will cause a huge ripple to the point where if you can't find something to be grateful for in your life, you can easily start with the fact that you're breathing in this moment in time. Another point is using the breath to mentally break you out of certain boxes, whether that be uh, depression, because what depression is you're suppressing your breath. So when you open it up with longer exhales, mainly nasal breathing, you open the pattern of breathing in efficient manner. And now efficiency, when you're focusing on longer exhales, by the time you inhale, you have more oxygen delivery. You have also more sense of release as well when it comes to that second exhale, and you feel the rhythm. And that's another thing, rhythm. So finding rhythm within your breath is also the aspect of play. So playing with your breath, nasal breathing, and focusing on the parasympathetic, and also we don't hold our breath. Those are the key factors. So the mental side, and then we go to the physical. We always go mental first, and then we go physical. So as I inhale, you know that you're also not lying to yourself, right? When you take that inhale. So when you exhale, you know you're not lying to yourself when you exhale. You can feel it. Keyword feel. So how you talk to me, you brought up manifestation and stuff of that nature, and that also ties with feeling. right? In terms of using certain emotions. And all emotions, they all have something in common. You can feel, keyword feel, and that's it. That's it. That is the key point of every emotion, is to learn how to even breathe through those emotions. Because when you're not breathing through those emotions can really start to fester then in your thoughts, and then even more in your breath. And then that creates another breathing pattern. Then that creates, now we're going down into the fascia, because the breath is the center point of the fascia. So now when you have irregular breath patterns, you have then that irregular impulse of the fascia, then have random points of trauma, then you'll have random thoughts of, why am I thinking like this? Why am I doing this? It all ties down to the breath.
It's so fascinating for me because one of my experiences with the breath was in a session that I was having. It was almost like it was a rebirthing session, but it was a session in which I was um, doing some emotional alchemy. I was just sort of figuring out what state I'm in, and after kind of an hour within this session that I'm having, I'm understanding that I'm in a state of apathy. I'm in this really down, deep state of just non-movement. I've given up. I don't want any more. I can't give up any more than I already have. And getting out of this state of apathy is is going to be tough. It's too big of a mountain to climb. These were the things that I was feeling and the state that I was in. And my mentor walked up to me and says, I remember him saying this before the session. He was saying that usually in a state of apathy, there's zero movement. You will hardly be able to even perceive your own breath because your breath isn't moving. It's not conscious in a way. And in order to get out of a state of apathy, one of the best ways to do that is to bring movement into the body, bring movement and motion. And the best way to do that is to focus on the breath. And so I noticed when I was in this deep state of apathy that my breath had was so little I did barely noticed it. And so I consciously took in a deep breath. And I took in one deep breath and it sent me into a birth trauma or reliving a birth trauma because the breath brought out so much emotion and my whole body felt this surge of energy just through that one breath that consciously bringing more energy and motion into my body sent me into a form of healing that I've never ever experienced before in my life, and it was really profound. And I'm still enjoying the benefits and what's come from that session. And that for me was like, wow, like one breath, and it changed everything in that moment. But what your principles are is that yes, in my case of being in apathy, it was that one breath, but that's the breath every day. That's the one breath you take every second, every part through the day, and it's just as important every single breath. Um, so yeah, I'm curious how you're using the breath, or what you sort of advise people in relation to their emotions, in relation to processing certain things that are coming up with them? Is there kind of techniques you can use and implement to kind of move you through these patterns that we ultimately need to uncover and transmute in a sense?
For sure. I would say anger. Let's start with anger. If you're angry, one of my favorite breaths is the before that, I do want to say using those emotions, honoring those emotions also is not the wrong thing to do. And I'll also tie this into panic attacks later. But when you're angry, you're boiled. You want to punch somebody, etc. Pulsating breaths on the exhale, where you take a one inhale and then you ripple and pulsate your breath as much as you can as you exhale. And what that is doing, I'll demonstrate. So as I'm exhaling, I'm kicking the back of my throat, or if you can with your nose, just create like a pulse, like stop it a little bit and create the pulse as it comes out. And what you're doing is you're actually creating even more nitric oxide in your nose, creating pressure. So now we're talking about pressure here, not just air and breathing, but now we're talking about pressure. And pressure has everything to do with down to our even our organ function. And uh, when you're angry, that's already a pattern, right? So when you're angry, when you're doing that, you're you're redistributing the pressure that you're feeling from the anger into more of your nose than anywhere else. So that's one way of letting out that anger and pressurizing it over and over and over. And you would keep on doing that and until you don't feel angry anymore or until you want to get up and just release in another way. But that's one of my favorites to do with people who have anger issues, or also doing this if you already know you have anger issues, do this in your downtime because it's peaceful times that we build. So when the war comes, you're best well equipped. And it's a quicker response for yourself, you know, and just honor the fact that you yourself have an impact on the world. So if you can harness your emotions that way, that's a great tool to use.
That sounds amazing. That's definitely something I could have known, could have done a few years back, when I had a lot of repressed anger. But I'm gonna take a mental note of that and try that next time because, yeah, it's like it is all about just being connected with the body and understanding your body and understanding that there are ways in which you can work with yourself to whether it's transmuting patterns, working with patterns, working with your emotions, or just simply working with your body and symptoms, which brings me on to what I wanted to ask you as well. It's like symptomology of the body. Are there practices and things that you do in which you work with the breath and the symptomology of the body and working with that?
Yeah, so I wanted to tap into panic attacks. You think panic attacks is a good connection? Yeah. So I personally even went through panic attacks myself and seen things go black. So panic attacks, when somebody's panicking, and if you're there to help, this is for anyone who's there to help in that moment in time. They're panicking, and it's it's easy to say, "Hey, calm down," sure, but we're panicking here. We're not even in the frame of even word logic in a sense to a certain degree. So it's good to also say, "Hey, I'm here," and notice their breathing. So if they're most likely panic attack, they're most likely mouth breathing. So they're already, doing like that. So what you want to do, because mirror neurons are real and we're all human, when the more parasympathetic person or anchor, if you will, is around someone who is not too much parasympathetic, no matter no matter what, all human down to the core of their foundation, they want to be in homeostasis. That is what the body will always crave, no matter what life throws at you. It'll always crave you wanting to be back at home, homeostasis. So, the person's having a panic attack. You want to be nasal breathing in the same way, just to enter their domain. Now you're entering their domain and you're breathing in their same way. But there's going to be a switch going off in their own head in their mirror neurons. It'll help them just by even breathing in that way. I've seen, help that even calm down a little bit even more. Especially when someone is flying for the first time. I've witnessed that, and I just match my breathing. I said what I need to say, but the parents was making fun of me, and then I'm like, all right, let me just breathe, and I match her breathing in a sense too, and it helped calm her down. So when you're breathing like that, you're gonna say, hey, I'm breathing with you, I'm breathing with you, and then you're gonna tell them, like, can you close your mouth? Look at me, I'm breathing the same way you are, and then they're gonna close their mouth, and they're gonna start breathing the same way, and then you're gonna say, hey, see, you're breathing, you're breathing, and then that's gonna let off another switch to really bring them more into homeostasis as well because they're witnessing, hey, I can take my pattern down. And then as you're breathing fast paced with them, then you want to slow down your breath from the fast pace to slow down and help them also slow down.
Wow, that's so powerful to know that. That's amazing. And so that's because you're sort of, yeah, you've entered their domain, but there is this morphic resonance that is happening, which is, like you're saying, the goal is always homeostasis and whatever brings balance back into the body, the mind, or that's such a powerful technique. Wow. Um,
Yeah, man.
yeah, I could,
And
yeah, carry on.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to say I could pick your head with all kinds of different scenarios and things like that because I'm pretty certain breathwork can be used in so many fun, creative, intuitive ways. But I kind of wanted to ask you as well is there's lots of information about breathwork. There's lots of conflicting information about breathwork. There's so many different practices, so many different traditions and cultures and techniques. Have you there are techniques that tell you to breathe a certain way, even if that goes against what you're naturally inclined to breathe. So
Yeah.
I've noticed some of these. So what are your thoughts on certain practices, and are there certain things we ought to look out for when we're looking into doing some kind of breath work?
I will say I believe in the integral way where, you know, society today is always fast paced, fast paced, fast paced, fast paced. And the integral way is also honoring that everyone, yes, sure, have their own healing, but if you go in an integral, climactic way of of also making it also practical and not just a method, that even has way more impact also psychologically too of integrating certain breath relations with everyday life. Because what got a person into a chaotic cycle in the first place? It was something that brought them out of homeostasis to begin with. So when you go the integral way, that's why I work with people all the way to a whole year. Not many people can even uh, do a whole breath work type thing for a whole 24 hours or a couple 3 days straight. So that's what we do with Breath Dojo, where you're honoring the fact that sure, we're not practicing any breath holding, we're not mouth breathing or hyperventilating to spike up cortisol and shock the body. Instead of shocking the body, we're going so deep into the homeostasis where people will start uh, feeling at one point, oh, this is making me really, really relaxed, or in some instances or some sessions, oh, this is making me tired. But then when they're done the session, they realize, oh no, that was actually another energy reserved that I didn't fully tap into because I was not fully in my homeostasis body, right? Or you can look at a professional athlete out there. Yeah, we can look at a professional athlete out there and give them this protocol and integrate with their life. And next thing you know, they can go on the court even longer in terms of their minutes in playtime. because they're not as fatigued. Because over time, instead of shocking the body, we went the integral way where they realized that, oh, I'm not gasping for air, and this is the third quarter of the four quarters of an NBA game. I'm not gasping for air, or my muscles aren't as sore as they would be because you went more of the integral way and not putting breath in a box. So that's another thing where we don't like to put breath in a box, and we we amplify the efficiency and the practicality, and that's the benefit of the parasympathetic side, where you can do that breath practice as long as your willpower allows you to. And I'm not talking about even force of will, but a subtle type of willpower that won't be too exhausting for the body, because one can get exhausted doing a cold plunge and doing the breath and then going back and forth. You're going to have that crash. That's known. The crashes are known. So with a parasympathetic side, and you're integrating it in in micro spurts and more throughout your day, what are you doing? You're increasing the frequency. No matter if you do it for 2 minutes there, 2 minutes there, 2 minutes there, 2 minutes there. The frequency is more important than the intensity. That's the number one thing I would say I learned from Tesla's work the hard way. And it just made sense. The frequency is more important than the intensity, for sure. And that, yeah, and that's where the parasympathetic really, that's where its foundation stands.
Yeah, it's like it didn't make sense to me that in order for us to shift back into a parasympathetic state, it's requiring us to enter the sympathetic. Like some of these practices are quite stressful for the body, and it's almost counterintuitive where respecting the nature of the body and where you want to be with the body and the parasympathetic state of the body and working with that subtly and slowly just as a as me just discerning just seems like that seems like the right way forward to work with the breath rather than forcing things.
Yeah, keyword force. So everything is force to a certain degree, but we can use an integral force or the external force, if you will. And the integral force is definitely softer, and it it also shines more light into the subtleties of life as well, which then increases your awareness of how your things like proprioception awareness goes up through the roof, in my opinion. So when people ask me what do I do when I work with athletes and stuff, I say proprioception for the scientists, but if we're in the jungle and etc., it's really just instinct. It is building up the natural foundations of instinct, and it all stems from your breath.
What are the because the breath is in itself divine and there's lots of spiritual connotations to the breath. It is, the one and all. So, do you use the breath in any of your own spiritual practices in your own ways? And yeah, what have you come to sort of understand about the breath as a spiritual conduit into healing and various other healings of the earth and people and things like that?
Yeah, so I would share one thing I love to do in the rising time, and it's programming the skin with organ breathing. And this is like one of the few practices where we actually do use the mouth. And as soon as you wake up, you're in theta for about 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes of first wake. You're in theta. So that means your subconscious is open and programmable for the better, hopefully. So when you wake, one of the things I love to do is blow on the skin all around with intentions, gratitude, prayers. Even if you're religious in that sense, you can quote a palms, if you, if you will, whatever floats your boat in that sense. But the breath is in every religion in that sense. But going back to this particular practice, when you're doing this and you're blowing on your skin, what are you gonna do when you go outside and the wind is hitting you 24/7? What do you think is replaying over and over in your mind, whether you realize it or not? And this is what the pores are for, the portals. For we are everything in the universe, right? And certain traumas and certain things we attract in our lives have everything to do with what's happening on our body. I think ancient Chinese medicine also allured to that, where you can look at the face and pinpoint what's happening in someone's direct insight of what they're going to attract in the next week or something of that nature. So down to the wrinkles, there's masters out there that can look at your wrinkles and be like, "All right, you about to get that job promotion next week." Yeah, but that's a powerful practice in itself in programming the skin and using your own breath and in that sense. And you guys can play around with that in so many different ways of programming.
Hmm. I think that's the fun and exciting thing about it is there's so many ways you can play around with it and experiment with it and ultimately have fun with it. That's what it's all about. Um,
Yeah.
and enjoying this, enjoying being more connected with the breath. And yeah, so I just want to say like this has been a very enlightening and I've been so consumed in this conversation and just learning a lot from you. So I really appreciate it. Last question for you, Devon, is what is next for you? You know with it with your breath matrix or yeah, what have you got coming up in the new year?
What I have coming up is a lot more breath therapy content up on YouTube. Devon the Black Airbender. So expect almost every couple hours you'll see videos being popped out. I have a library that just needs to be dumped. So I'm getting rid of that, and also we're still certifying people in breath therapy, and that's going to be growing over the year. And I'm breathing into showcasing and sharing breath therapy all over the world. We also have crystal lenses going and flowing one day. I want to be in eye doctor places, and get them more on the natural side of crystal lenses, So, because we've been getting testimonials of people switching them from their prescription because crystals in general emit infrared. So it's great for the mitochondria and its natural crystalline structure. So your eyes will pick up on it as nature gives its healing.
Wow, amazing. And where can people find you on socials, website?
So Devon, the Black Airbender on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, the Black Airbender.
Awesome. Go and check Devon out. You're gonna love his content. And if you stayed up till this end, you would know he's so informative and intuitive and yeah, amazing with the stuff that he does. So yeah, an amazing conversation. Thank you for coming on, Devon. It's been a pleasure.
Much love, everyone. Thank you for sharing the breath. And the main website is www.alchemybreath.work.
Go check that out, everybody.